Hello and welcome to The Last Word, the Dota 2 talk show where we talk about Dota 2 teams going to the Lima Major. We're here to talk about expectations, we're here to talk about how they performed during the DPC, and to do so, we have a great set of panelists. Winter Dota, yes, that's very cool, you're very swaggy. Adam, 3 for 3, and Richie, SeeknStrike Dota. Lovely. You guys can already tell by the tone of the show is going to be very serious and not lighthearted whatsoever. My name is Alpha Plus. I will be your host, and I'll just be guiding these gentlemen among the topics. For today, for this episode specifically, we are going to be talking about their expertise, which is SEA. There are 3 teams from SEA going to the Lima Major: Execration, Geek Slate, and Talon. And these 3 teams, how will they perform? Will they perform well? We'll find out. Let's start with Execration. Winter, my good friend. Execration, probably the newest team to make it to the Lima Major, right? A bunch of, let's call them unknowns for the international crowd, right? Even though they've been in C for quite a while. How do you feel like they're going to fare in general in the Major?
I feel like they are going to have a lot of problems, like in terms of like strategy. Like I feel like they won't be able to be as comfortable like as they were in C, because initially everybody was bad like in C when the DPC started. So I felt like because everybody was not doing well, they were able to capitalize on that. A lot of the games that they won, I felt like they shouldn't be winning. And yeah, sure, they have some time to fix their problems and prepare for the Major, but I feel like I wouldn't have too high of expectations on them.
I think with March in the picture, they definitely have an opportunity to go there and learn. I think that's usually what gives you a good run, right? Either you go there and you're a team that brought something new. We talk about like maybe Neon when they got top 6 in the Major. They were very fast-paced and play very differently compared to other teams. And I think that's Execration. They have a chance to go there and be the other team that adapts. Because I think they have strategies that they enable each other right now. But they need to go there and they need to make it better. And I think with March there, it definitely is possible.
I think they're going to be one of those teams at the Major that starts really strong and then they kind of get figured out, you know? Especially because they're going to be a little bit of the newer team on the block, not a lot of international scrim experience. I mean, they're coming up from Division 2 straight to the Major, you know, in their first season. That's very rare among Major attendees. And, you know, they've been playing a ton in C, but other than the C teams, which are only 3 of the 18, I think the other teams are going to take some time to get used to them. Especially because it's not the usual team that you'd expect March to be coaching. So I do think it is going to be one of those teams that they do really well in the first 2 days. They're going to burn bright and then maybe kind of get figured out towards the end. That's where I'm scared for them, is their longevity, especially if they do make it to playoffs, how well they can do on the main stage and how far they can get.
I like that you bring that storyline straight from Div 2 into the Major. There's one other team that had a similar storyline, though, with a couple of changes in players, which was Team Tickles, eventually Gaming Gladiators, right? They did that in Western Europe, and their first big Major was Stockholm. It was like literally from rags to riches story. They performed pretty well there. Could you think that Execration can be a similar storyline here?
I think it's not unreasonable. I don't think it's impossible, but I kind of agree with Winter. I think they were one of the teams that really came out swinging. You know, March had him, he cracked the whip, and they had that regimen going from like out of the gates, right? I think in particular the series versus SMG, right, where SMG was a little bit shaky, is kind of I think that was their second matchup in the entire season we had here in C. To me, that's kind of, you know, the stuff that they got away with here in C that I don't think they're going to be able to get away with against opponents of higher caliber, which is why I'm a little bit shaky on saying, yes, they're going to have that same kind of run. I'm not so sure, honestly.
Let's touch on the March thing. I wanted to ask you, Adam, actually, because you mentioned March. You were the first to mention March. Do you think Execration got good this season because of the March effect? Or do you feel like they actually also improved as players and they now get to show it?
I feel like consistency is what kind of happened. Before their roster change with the Carlo and March coming in, they were inconsistent. Like we see previously in Div 1, they do put up fight against like Fnatic, Boom, but they always lose in the end and they're not consistently beating the teams. But this season they look a lot more calm. Like in games, I would say most of their series, they probably lost the laning phase and they're like 4k behind in like 10-15 minutes. And I mean, I think that's like Winter said, the teams were a bit weaker in the early of the season, but we don't see Execration like panicking or throwing and stuff like that. I think that's like confidence and like believing in each other, and I feel like it came in with the addition of March.
Okay. Winter, do you believe that too? Do you think the players have also improved together with them?
I feel like a lot of it has to do with March. I felt like the biggest weapon that they had in the first couple of weeks is the draft. I felt like the drafting was pretty good, like compared to the play. The play was so, especially in the laning phase. I feel like they are not going to be able to play the game properly in Peru because they are very weak in the laning phase and they're up against much better players in terms of like denying creeps, especially the mid lane. I feel like Bob is going to struggle in the mid lane. And a lot of the games might be decided because he loses his lane too high. Like even in the first couple of weeks, there are games, he lost his lane pretty badly, but they were just much better as a team, and they had a much more solid draft. So the draft itself gave them opportunities to win the game, even though they had a very hard laning phase. But I feel like in Peru, that's not going to happen so frequently.
Would you guys agree with that?
I think I've definitely seen games where he loses the matchup way harder than he should have. Yeah, I do agree. I think Tino and Shanks are like, I'm big fans of them. I think they're like really stand out. They've been together for so long. I think those two are like the upper end for me, where I think they definitely is a world where they're on par with other players.
And Palos and Carlo are the...
I feel like Carlo is, I mean, he just transitioned to post 5. I don't really feel too much from him.
I mean, he's like, I feel like he does his job, but not in a very spectacular way. You wouldn't say that when you look at a position 5 player, there are two things generally you look at. First, the laning phase, how is he playing the laning phase, and then the next thing is how is he using the observer, what's the vision, and making it work with the vision, with the smoke. So those are the things I feel like, I wouldn't say that I see very, very special things that he's doing. I feel like he's doing his job for sure. And just because also he just switched to the role, so maybe he's still trying to fit into things. But in the lane, I feel like him and Palos, they're doing okay. They're doing their job. They are getting what they should be getting with the lane matchups, and it's allowing their team to at least play the game.
I think you're onto something there. I think like perhaps an individual skill, this team's not rated the highest, right? But Dota is, after all, a team game, like 5v5, and they do really impress me when it comes to their team fights, especially their Tiger priority and like the way that they identify how they need to win fights, even when they're a little bit behind like an item or so, right? Being able to always get the right kind of initiations, even on Bob especially, who I think we saw in like a couple of Batrider games, right? Just always find like the right lassos, always jump the right target first. To me, that's always been where this team kind of shined. And maybe you're right, that is partly due to March giving them the right kind of draft, to the right kind of conditions to get back into the game, and a little bit of the C teams as well not being up to scratch in that first couple of weeks. But the fact that they have those wins under their belts and they're coming in number 1 out from C, I don't know. Maybe they will be a little bit like Team Spirit, surprise everyone on the main stage, right? Who knows?
They're also the weakest first seed, as in like when you talk about standings in most regions, this is the region where you don't see a very clear disparity between like say Execration and Geek Slate. Whereas in every other region, even SA, like Beast Coast stomped EG in that game, right? Even though they were expected to be kind of close. So maybe Execration isn't actually a real first seed. They just happen to be there.
But I feel like learning is where you come from. Like Execration, they had this hot start in the start of the season, so they were very focused on their own ideas. So they were kind of like always here, right, in the line. But other teams were like catching up, which is why their games looked a bit different, I think, coming into the season. And I think that's a trap that's very easy to fall into, where you stop learning because you're on top, right? So you don't go up as much. But the major, when they start screaming better teams and start identifying more problems and more small details, and I think that's where like the March factor will come in and probably hopefully enable them to like grow as a team. At the end of the day, they might not win the major, but if they go there and they come back a better team than they left, that's a big win for me.
Okay, so you could even call it like a prep major, an experience major for them, right, as well. Like as long as they improve, it's not their goal to win this major, it's the goal to win the odd. If we talk about goals here, we also have another team that comes in with similar experience, except for one of their players, mind you, which is Geek Slate, the second seed for SCA technically. Also a team full of unknowns, quote unquote, for the international audience. They're a team that, I mean, you can't really say they come from Div 2, but most of their players do come from Div 2. Geek Slate, do you guys have higher expectations for them than Execration?
I don't know. I feel like their strength is they're very, very unique in terms of how they're selecting their heroes, and they have a very distinct way of like thinking of the game. It's very different from Execration and very different from Talon. And I feel like a lot of the way that they structure their draft is going to get harder for them to win against the better teams. Like I feel like against the weaker teams, you can probably get away with like a draft that's not so good. I feel like when I look at the draft, I always play the percentage game, which draft has a higher probability of making a mistake, and which draft has, you can make a lot of mistakes, but you can still win.
I just want to ask you, Winter, sorry to interrupt, but do you think Dota is much more about having one specific kind of play style and not so much plays to make? Because the way you make it sound, it's like you have a draft and then you have a recipe. And then if you don't follow the recipe, it's gonna...
Yeah, I feel like Dota has reached a point where, because everybody is so good nowadays, so it's all about there's a very clear, better way to play the game, a correct way to play the game. And whoever is winning is doing more correct things across the game compared to the other team. The other team is making... Sometimes you can make more mistakes but still win the game. That's because of the draft. Your draft allows you to make more mistakes, and the other team's draft, in this case is going to be Geek Slate's draft, is not allowed to make so many errors in their strategy. So then the draft that made more error could still win, But that's not going to happen every game, I feel like if you pit two strong teams together, both teams have equally drafts, very similar kind of win condition drafts, then all these small little details are going to be very important. Whoever makes the wrong move first, you have to be able to make as many correct plays in the game as possible to minimize that.
What are your thoughts on this notion? I'll begin.
I feel like I was very impressed by Geek Slate at the start. They look very clean. I think in the second half of DPC, they looked a tier below how they started. They started crossing the line with hero picks, I think. They're trying to be very... I wouldn't say trying to be special, but I feel like there are solutions to some things don't often work in the meta. And it's kind of reflected in their games, where we see them struggle a lot more than they did in the first half of the season.
Okay. Let's talk about the last entertaining team that we have, which is Talon. We'll start with you, Winter, because you called them, out of the teams in DPC, the team with the highest ceiling, especially the other ones going to the major. Do you still believe that about them?
So for Talon, I think their greatest strength is how they structure their draft, around jabs. He said in an interview he's not the only one drafting, but I assume he has the most power, with how
it's him and Sunbi is what he meant.
Yeah, but I still feel like he has a lot of...
Sunbi picks the 4 heroes, then just...
Yeah, I feel like he has a lot of say, on his own hero, on how the draft is structured. Some games, I feel like, specifically during the second pick phase games, most of the games, his potential hero will be in front, but the hero, as the draft progresses, might not be his hero. And in the first pick phase, he gets... Initially, during the first 2 weeks, I feel like his hero still pops out in the first phase, but then he made an adjustment because they were losing a lot of games when they were first picked. And that's because he's the win condition and his hero is picked early, and then he gets countered. And then in week 2 or beginning of week 3, they started to switch everything up. So basically, the first pick junction changes for them. They withhold his hero, and his hero gets picked later, and that's how I feel like he gets a lot of priority. Not to say that it's a bad thing that he gets a lot of priority, but they are winning the games after they switch certain things, So obviously when I see that, I feel like partly of why it's happening in the game itself, that person who gets priority has a lot of say in the game itself. He has a very strong voice. That's why when you change the pick sequence and give him a lot more priority, when he's more comfortable, obviously he's going to affect the comms inside the game, and he's going to talk more, and he's going to make a lot more calls, then the game will become different.
I mean, it's easier to lead when you're strong, right? You lose your lane, you're playing recovery, you can't really make calls in the game. I think that's natural for most Dota players. Sorry, post 5s.
For him, I feel like sometimes when they pick his hero first, he gives me the feeling that I don't care if my hero
just
comes
suck
out
it up.
early, I'm gonna suck it up. But at the end of the day,
He has more impact when he doesn't.
he needs to have more impact in that team because he's the captain. Sort of. I think he probably has the biggest voice there. So if he gets a good game, everything will change.
I mean, it's true that it's funny that you mentioned that, because the two teams that you mentioned that have the highest ceiling are the two teams specifically that believe their offlaner is their captain, and also that their offlaner is the biggest playmaker, their offlaner is the guy who decides the game. Both SMG and Talon have the belief. No other team agrees with that. I mean, they might have strong offlaners, but they don't have an offlaner that goes and says, I'm going to make every single call in the game.
Yeah, but Geek Slate, they do prioritize in the draft force
They
his
do.
hero.
They do. But the calls also come from Scam a lot.
Yeah, but I feel like he shares the responsibility. And when I played with Nico, I feel like he's not a captain player. Scam it's more like it's natural and he's the voice. Even though Nico talks a lot in the game, but he's not the person that's going to make the tough calls during critical moments.
There's a difference between saying I want to do this or we can do this, then like Scammy just play drone. It's like we're hitting drone. That's a team call. It's kind of different. You're sharing your ideas on your like timings with your own hero and what you can do or what your opponent can do. It's very different from like pulling people to you and like let's do this, guys. Let's go.
On the Talon team, Richie, what do you think about them? Do you also believe they're the highest ceiling? Do you think they could actually pop off at the major?
I think so. I think, at least from what we've seen in C, I'm pretty convinced that this is a very good meta to be an offlaner. Like, I genuinely believe so, right? So I think having a team that, if your captain or a lot of your win condition or your shot caller in the early game is around your offlaner, and then you draft around them as well, I believe that'll lead you to a lot of success. It's an aura-oriented meta, right? This mechanism early is insane, right? And there's even like some LCs and Centaurs getting picked up, which are some really heavy snowball type heroes that can win the early for almost any, like a Spectre, Pair this with another fast carry like a Lina or an NP. Like, I see a lot of reason why these kinds of teams with a strong offlaner can definitely succeed. Yeah, for sure.
Games are longer, picks are different. Is this region garbage? Is it good? Winter? Quick, garbage or good? It's one of the G words.
That's it. We all know.
Not all garbage, but mostly garbage.
Okay, great. Adam.
It's a great region.
It's a great region.
Yeah, I think we're hot garbage. We're like coming out, All right. Don't throw it away properly. We're gonna get you.
It's like it's Soprano, right? Like you can make a business out of garbage.
It's like it's not only that, it's like new garbage as well. It's like new stuff that's being brought. It's like new players with the Korean coaches, that Korean garbage is some real good stuff.
Okay. Sure, that's good. That's it. Thank you for coming to Last Word. You've heard it here. C is garbage, but it's hot garbage, Korean garbage, and not all garbage.
3, 2, 1.
This crowd is actually able to do so for a decent amount of time.
Time to take out like the flame cloak. That's get a lot of damage, but here comes the black hole.